We have the opportunity to make a habit of empathy.
The new standard devolved even further during the Roberts nomination. Judge Roberts was a spectacular nominee, a man whose background and legal abilities, even according to Democrats, made him one of the most qualified Supreme Court nominees in the history of our country. For him, Democrats came up with an even more disturbing test. Ironically, no one senator articulated this new test more forcefully than Senator Obama. In a floor speech announcing his opposition to John Roberts, Senator Obama was perfectly straightforward. Roberts was completely qualified, he said, but he still wouldn't get his vote. Here's what Senator Obama said on the Senate floor, quote, "There's absolutely no doubt in my mind Judge Roberts is qualified to sit on the highest court of the land. Moreover, he seems to have the comportment and the temperament that makes for a good judge. He is humble. He is personally decent." The reason Senator Obama would vote against Judge Roberts, he said, rested not on any traditional standard, but on a new one, a standard which amounted to a kind of alchemy based on what he described as, quote, one's deepest values, one's core concerns, one's broader perspectives on how the world works, and the depth and breadth of one's empathy. What's come to be known as the empathy standard. So over the course of the Bush administration, the rules completely changed. Not only had it become common practice to block nominees on the grounds of ideology, but now it was acceptable to reject someone based solely on the expectation that their feelings wouldn't lead them to rule in favor of certain groups. Suddenly, judges weren't even expected to follow the fundamental principle of blind justice. Deference had eroded even more. Now, as I've stated repeatedly throughout this debate, empathy is a very good quality in itself. And I have no doubt that Senator Obama, now President Obama, had good intentions, and that his heart was in the right place when he made this argument. But when it comes to judging, empathy is only good if you're lucky enough to be the person or group that the judge in question has empathy for. In those cases, it's the judge, not the law, that determines the outcome. And that's a dangerous road to go down if you believe, as I do, in a nation not of men, but of laws. Which brings us to Judge Sotomayor. Over the past several weeks, Judge Sotomayor has impressed all of us with her life story. And the confirmation process isn't easy. I admire anyone who goes through it, which is why I was gratified by Judge Sotomayor's statement at the conclusion of the hearing that she was treated fairly by everyone. But the first question I have to ask myself in deciding how to vote on this nominee is this: how stands the traditional standard for voting on nominees? Deference is still an important principle, but it was clearly eroded during the filibusters of appeals court nominees early in the Bush administration, and it was eroded even further when senators voted against John Roberts and tried to filibuster Samuel Alito. Moreover, the introduction of a new standard, the empathy standard, forces us to reevaluate again the degree of deference a president should be granted. Isn't it incumbent upon even those of us who have always believed in deference to be even more cautious about approving nominees in this new environment? I believe it is. If empathy is the new standard, then the burden is on any nominee who is chosen on that basis to show a firm commitment to equal justice under law. In the past, such a commitment would have been taken for granted. Americans have always had faith that our judges would apply the law fairly, or at least always knew that they should. Unfortunately, the new empathy standard requires a measure of reassurance about this. If nominees aren't even expected to apply equal justice, we can't be expected simply to defer to the president, especially if that nominee is a sitting judge, no less, has repeatedly doubted the ability to adhere to this core principle. This doesn't mean that I would oppose a nominee just because he or she is nominated by a Democrat. It means that at a minimum, nominees should be expected to uphold the judicial oath that judges in this country have taken since the earliest days of our nation, namely, that they will administer justice without respect to persons and do equal right to the poor and, yes, to the rich, and faithfully and impartially discharge and perform all the duties incumbent upon them under the Constitution and laws of the United States, so help them God. Judge Sotomayor flatly rejected an appeal by firefighters who had scored highly. Here was a case where Judge Sotomayor's long history of advocacy for group preferences appeared to overtake an even-handed application of the law. Judge Sotomayor didn't empathize with the firefighters who had earned a promotion, and they suffered as a result. This is the real-world effect of the empathy standard. If the judge has empathy for you, great. But if she has it for the other guy, it's not so good. That's why you can call this new standard a lot of things, but you certainly can't call it justice.